We are, we can make it through every single thing. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Fearless we are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I know that we get confused when things are not under control. No, no, we can't see into the future, and we've got blinds, and it hurts when things don't go our way. But we can say that we are stronger than any obstacle. Yes, we are braver than what we've been taught. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single day. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every little thing.
This message was brought to you by Not Nice Records.
Sometimes it really feels like hope has left us with no option, and then sometimes we get so caught up in what we think life should be. Very much enough. Our hearts become slowly feeling so much pain that we can see past the stormy weather, but it'll get better, 'cause we are stronger than any obstacle. Oh, There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I know that we get confused when things are not under control. No, no, we can't see into the future, and we've got blinds, and it hurts when things don't go our way. But we can say that we are stronger than any obstacle. Yes, we are braver than what we've been taught. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through everything. We can make it through everything. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through everything, everything. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single day. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every little thing.
This message was brought to you by Not Nice Records.
Sometimes it really feels like hope has left us with no option, and then sometimes we get so caught up in what we think life should be. Yeah, we lost our hearts become slowly feeling so much pain that we can't see past the stormy weather. But it'll get better, 'cause we are stronger than any obstacle. Braver than what we've been taught. We've been taught. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Every single thing. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single thing. Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I know that we get confused when things are not under control. No, no, we can't see into the future, and we've got blinds, and it hurts when things don't go
brought to you by Not Nice Records.
Sometimes it really feels like hope has left us with no option, and then sometimes we get so caught up in what particular should be. Tell me what's enough. Our hearts become slowly feeling so much pain that we can't see past the stormy weather, but it'll get better, 'cause we are stronger than any obstacle. Braver than what we've been taught. We've been taught.
Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single day.
Every single day. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single day. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single day. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single day.
Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I know
That we get confused when things are not under control, and we can't see into the future, and we've got blinds, and it hurts when things don't go our way, but we can say that we are
Stronger than any obstacle. Yes we are. Braver than what we've been taught.
we've been taught. Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through everything. Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through every single day.
Strong, yes we are. Powerful, yes we are. We can make it through every single day.
Fearless we are. We are great, yes we are. We can make it through.
Good evening, everyone. For members of the media who are joining us, this is your 30-second countdown to begin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Media Center here at the Office of the Prime Minister in Kingston, Jamaica. Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, had just completed the meeting of the executive arm, the Cabinet, and will now update the nation on matters pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic and related areas. Present with us this evening are the ministers of the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. the Honourable Christopher Tufton, the Honourable Desmond McKenzie, the Minister of Local Government and Community Development, and the Honourable Edmund Bartlett, the Minister of Tourism. We also have with us Mrs. Audrey Sewell, the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, as well as Mr. Dunstan Bryan, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, as well as the country's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jacqueline Bisesa Mackenzie. I now hand over to the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Naomi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me apologize for our late start. Always the case when we decide to have a press conference just after Cabinet. The deliberations at Cabinet are usually very extensive, and obviously some ministers want to ensure that their position is always the strong position, and we have to balance, and that leads to even more conversation and deliberations. But I think at the end of the day, we come down with the right decisions. So please forgive the late start, but let me get right into it. We normally start off with our graph, which should be appearing on your screen anytime now. And to just give our usual recap, the solid black line, which is now appearing, shows the cumulative number of cases, and we are now at 698 cases. I believe, Minister Tufton, we have had 2 new cases today, so we are now at 698. The dotted black line displays the number of cases without the workplace cluster, and we always put that there to just remind us just what one incident could do, that if there is any departure from the protocols, how it could have an impact on our numbers. Unfortunately, since our first case, we have had 10 deaths as depicted by the red line. The green line that you are now seeing shows that we have had 553 persons who have recovered from COVID-19. The final line in this graph, which is the blue line, shows the number of active cases. That is the number of persons who still have the virus. Our recovery rate is now somewhere in the region of 79.2%. The most important number that we now need to focus on is the number of persons hospitalized. As of yesterday, we have had 13 persons hospitalized, including suspected positive cases of COVID-19. We also have 13 persons isolated in government facilities and 100 isolated at home, 42 quarantined in government facilities, and 3,581 quarantined at home. Now, the second graph, which should be appearing on your screen in a couple seconds, would show the effect of controlled re-entry. That is the new numbers that we have brought in. The dashed purple line, which should be coming up anytime now, shows the number of cases excluding the positive cases from persons arriving under the controlled re-entry program. So in other words, if we didn't have the controlled re-entry program starting from somewhere around the 1st of June, that would be our numbers, 535 thereabout. But of course, that is not an option for us. We must bring home our Jamaicans. That is just for illustrative purposes to see that if there were no re-entry, that our curve would be essentially flat, which would mean that we have essentially brought under control the spread of the virus locally. With the controlled re-entry program, you could see that we are now at 698 cases. In effect, we have added approximately 162 positives to our numbers as imported cases. Now, since June 1, we have added 82 new cases, which amounts to a positive rate of about 0.7%. So since June 1, when we established the accelerated controlled re-entry and then the controlled entry program on the 15th of June, 82 persons have been tested positive from the numbers that have come in, and that translates to approximately 0.7% in terms of a positive rate, and that is well below what we had projected. We had projected that we would have probably a 2.5% positive rate, and we set our trigger from that, from June 1, and the end of June, based upon that 2.5% projected positive, we would have had somewhere in the region of about 851 cases. Thankfully, that did not materialize. Our positive rate is 0.7, and we are at 698. So I think we could declare today that the program of controlled re-entry, which was between the 1st of June to the 15th of June, and then the program of controlled entry from the 15th of June to the 30th of June, I think generally you could say that those two programs were successful. We managed to bring in our Jamaicans safely, and we managed to bring in visitors and residents safely between the month of June. This is not to say that we are out of the woods. This is not to say that we can now become complacent. I observe, I'm seeing where there's a complacent in, where people somehow have the view that the pandemic is over. That is not the case, and I want to take this opportunity to again appeal to our Jamaicans to remember, observe the measures, wear your mask, do your hand sanitizing, do your social distancing, and just be very careful about your personal health and your own interactions. The pandemic is not over, as you would see in countries that are close to us, that their numbers are rising significantly. And it is, aside from the good management that we have given to the pandemic, but a lot has to do with your own personal responsibility and your faithfulness and consistency in observing the measures. And that has ensured that we have kept our numbers here low. But that comes at a very high cost. And now we are at the point where we will have to reconfigure and rethink how we continue to apply our public health measures in terms of managing the pandemic. So let me turn now to some of the measures that are in place and how they are being reconfigured. So most of the measures that are in place would have come to an end on the 30th of June. So we have to give notice of what the new measures are to get people prepared. So as we seek to look at the new measures that will obtain as of July 1, 2020, we emphasize that we will continue to take a risk-based management approach, which is, as I've said, is evidence-based, measured, and proportionate. The objective continues to be the need to reduce the exposure risk of the population to COVID-19 while increasing the capacity of the public health system to respond to cases within the population so as to reduce the risk of spread of the virus. Now, curfews. The day to next day, night to early morning curfews will continue in place, starting now at 11 p.m. on the night of June 30th, 2020 to 5 a.m. July 1, 2020, day to day until 5 a.m. on the morning of July 31st, 2020. So essentially what that means is that we have increased your movement hours, reduced the curfew hours by 1 hour. So instead of 10 p.m., the curfew starts at 11 p.m., and this will be for the entire month of July. Licensed public passenger transport, whether or not they are state or privately operated, are allowed 1 hour after the end of curfew. So as of Wednesday night, July 1, that will now be between 11 p.m. and 12 midnight until the 31st of July 2020, and they will be allowed to travel home from their last passenger drop-off, and they would have 1 hour before the beginning of curfews. That would be between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. until July 31st, 2020, to travel to their first passenger pickup. Of course, no passenger must be transported in their vehicles during the additional 1 hour periods allowed for transport operators to travel to and from their homes. In terms of gatherings, gatherings are not to exceed 20 persons, and this will apply up to July 14th, 2020. And whenever we do the measures in 2-week stretches, that is to give us time to observe as to whether or not we can go for the long term with these measures. So we are increasing from 10 to 20. And gatherings, I think, have been one of the gathering rule has been a very important rule in the management of the pandemic. And we are at the stage now where we believe that we can increase the gathering numbers. However, we must at this point emphasize that for any gathering at all, you must practice your social distancing. That is the minimum 6 feet apart, and always wear your masks. Do your hand sanitizing. Do your own surveillance. Look for people who are coughing and sneezing and stay away from them. And if you are ill, stay home. In terms of the operating hours of markets and vending in public arcades and public transportation centers, these will now be as follows. Mondays to Saturdays, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. You will recall that they were Mondays to Saturdays, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We have now added an additional hour. Markets will remain closed on Sundays. This is usually the period of time that the various municipal authorities do their sanitization program and cleanup. Now, the creative sector and entertainment, we have heard the appeals from the entertainment industry. Indeed, I listened to them very carefully. I have seen some proposals come across my desk. I've listened to the interviews on radio. And I do know a few people in entertainment who constantly send me messages and who don't miss a beat to appeal. And of course, you will know that my constituency is the heartbeat of Kingston. Minister Bartlett will say Jamaica is the heartbeat of the world. We have a very vibrant hip strip in the constituency, so I get the appeals on a regular basis. Yes, we will be at our next COVID management meeting, which would be Friday of this week. We will now give some focus to looking at the protocols and some of the proposals and suggestions. This is not an invitation to inundate. We wouldn't be able to examine all the proposals, but we will be looking now seriously at the industry to see how we can see to its reopening in a safe way for everyone. It will take some time. I'm not here telling you that next week or the week after, but at least we will start the process. And just as how we have done with the bars and the churches and other areas that we have opened up, we follow the gradual approach, and we also ensure that it is evidence-based and situationally appropriate. So I want to thank the entertainment community for their patience. Yes, I have seen some of the flyers saying no entertainment. Well, I won't say what the other part of the slogan is, but Minister Mackenzie, I believe you showed me the flyer where it said no entertainment, no voice. Yes, well, we pay close attention to the entertainment industry and our friends in the entertainment industry. We want to get you back up and running, but we want to do it safely. So we will start the examination of that on Friday. I'm almost certain that the Economic Recovery Task Force would have spent some time looking at some of the protocols as well. So significant work would have been done in some areas of entertainment. So we'll put all of that together, and we should now be in a position within the month of July to see how best we can reopen some of the entertainment venues. In terms of restaurants and places of amusement, Minister Mackenzie will give you a briefing today, but I expect that in Parliament on Wednesday you will give the full details as to how that will work. Now, I must say that, Minister Mackenzie has done an exceptional job in managing the bars and other areas of reopening, including the beaches. But recently I saw some pictures of the beaches in Jamaica. I thought they were the beaches in Miami, and I had to look closer to realize that it was a beach in Jamaica. I know that the psychology of the lockdown has created a huge depression even for some. That some people are just so now fatigued and frustrated, and going to the beach, going to the rivers, that's a great outlet. And we understand that, we acknowledge that. We want you to be able to have some relief, some distraction, but we also want you to be safe. And there are notions going around that you can't get ill or contract the virus when you are in the sea water or you are at the beach. But you can contract it if you are buying from a vendor, if you're all close together, if you're undertaking sport activities where you're all close together. So, we make the appeal, and Minister Mackenzie, I'm certain, will make the appeal again, that if you are going to the beach and you see a crowd there, don't go. If you're going to the beach as a household unit, stay together. People who operate the beaches, we have asked that they don't put out discussing them. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Education, and we are expecting that by our next press conference we should be able to have some protocols as to how we would treat with the reopening of daycare nurseries. Very important as people go back to work. Measures related to the wearing of masks, infirmaries, the correctional officers, and so on will be extended to July 31st, 2020. And now I want to give you an update on the controlled re-entry of Jamaicans. The latest number from the JamCovid site and the Visit Jamaica site, this would be, we have processed now approximately 31,000 applications for Jamaicans and visitors who want to come to Jamaica. 23,000 are residents, meaning Jamaicans who are coming back home, and non-Jamaicans who live in Jamaica. And 8,000 are non-residents, visitors, tourists. Approximately 14,600 persons have arrived in Jamaica since we have put in the controlled re-entry program. 9,300 are residents, meaning Jamaicans who live here and non-Jamaicans who reside here. And 5,300 are non-residents, meaning tourists, Jamaicans who are visiting, and non-Jamaicans who are Jamaicans who come here to visit. Now, an additional 15,000 persons have been approved to travel. 12,400 are residents, meaning Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans who reside here, and 2,600 are non-residents. So in that number would be some tourists who would be coming, or most of that number would be tourists. Now, during June, we had an average of 5 flights and about 410 passengers arriving per day. For July, our projections are, well, these are not projections. These are what we expect by virtue of the flight schedules that we are now seeing. We're going to be expecting an average of 22 flights and 1,680 passengers per day. Now, I want you to understand the call on resources that this will mean. You would also recognize that there are many Jamaicans who have been overseas now since we closed the borders to incoming passengers, and that would be somewhere in late March. It is unthinkable that we should do anything to prevent their return home. And what you're seeing here is the buildup of Jamaicans who have wanted to come home, and now they are exercising their right so to do through the protocols that we have established. So we still have to make sure that they can enter Jamaica safely and that the population here is protected. But you can imagine the resource constraints that we would face to keep the same levels of controlled re-entry that we have kept through the month of June. We did that very high level control protocol so that we could establish, using very stringent criteria, what is the risk that the population faces from the re-entry program. And I believe I haven't seen yet the expenditure. But Minister Tufton, when you get a chance, and amongst all the other things you have to do, I would love to see what that program has cost the country. We now know, in keeping with our evidence-based management, what the risk is. We budgeted 2.5% positive rate. We ended up at somewhere at about 0.7. It doesn't mean that we drop all guard. It doesn't mean that we don't need to have protocols in place. What it means, however, is that we can reconfigure the limited resources that we have, because in order for us to have done this, that is to put in place this very robust control entry protocol, is that we have had to move resources from the interior, meaning we have had to move resources from the clinics, from the health centers, from the hospitals, from head office, from the regional offices, and they were basically stationed at the airports. One airport had about 200. If you took into consideration the police and military personnel and everybody who else was there, and both airports were operating at that kind of manpower and capacity. That is not something that we can do forever. And the longer we do it, the greater the fatigue. And at this point, let me thank our health workers. They have done a tremendous job. They have made us proud. They have done well. And, you know, Jamaica is the talk of the town about our protocols. But these protocols can be stressed and stretched to the point where they defeat the purpose. So we have deliberated now for the last 2 weeks, and which is one of the reasons why we were late in coming to the press conference, as to how we will treat with the re-entry. The CMO is here, and if I run into any difficulties in explaining it, she will come and stand right beside me along with the Minister of Health, who will both help to explain the sound public health science that guides our decision making. So as of July 1, 2020, we will still require testing for controlled entry. However, since the commencement of controlled re-entry on June 1, we now have the benefit of testing for over a month, and we now know the positive rate, 0.7%. Therefore, we can now reconfigure the protocols surrounding controlled entry into Jamaica at our airports. This will allow us to more efficiently utilize our limited resources for testing and surveillance, both for ports and intra-island at our health centers and other health facilities. So all arriving passengers would still be subject to a health screening and risk assessment on arrival at the port of entry. Visitors to Jamaica from areas declared as high risk at this time by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, so areas such as Florida, New York, Arizona, and Texas, those are considered now high risk. So persons registering to visit Jamaica on the Visit Jamaica website, coming from these areas, as of July 1, will be required to upload a valid PCR test, which must be no more than 7 days old from the expected date of their arrival. Now, approval for travel to Jamaica on the Visit Jamaica website will be subject to the upload of this valid PCR test. As of July 10, persons visiting Jamaica, that is a non-resident visiting Jamaica from the declared high-risk areas, will be required to present their PCR test. So let me just walk that through a little bit. So yes, we are requiring pre-testing, but the requirement for pre-testing will, as we have said, be risk-based. We're looking at the areas where the numbers in the originating destination, or the area they're originating from, where those numbers are high, and those areas we would, as of July 1, require persons who are visiting Jamaica. That is, they have to go on the Visit Jamaica website. That site will now require the visitor to upload a valid PCR test. That test will be used to determine approval for entry into Jamaica. And we have put it in that language, but obviously, if you upload a test that is negative, that doesn't mean you will be automatically approved. We still look at other things, but it is highly likely you'll be approved. But certainly, if you upload a test that is positive, then we would not approve you. And it is very important that that be said. If you know that you are positive, we urge you, reconsider your travel. Reconsider going out into the public, taking, transportation and going on the aircraft. If you know you have been exposed and you are in high-risk areas, then don't seek to travel at this time. So, yes, we will require pre-testing, and the condition would be that when you arrive and you present your pre-test, it should be no older than 7 days from the time you have tested. And we will be requiring persons to present their test from the 10th of July. So that's enough time for people who are seeking to travel to make arrangements to have their test. Right, now Jamaican residents and visitors staying outside of the resilient corridor. So these are people who are coming into Jamaica. They are Jamaicans or non-Jamaicans, but who probably live here or who have family here, and they are staying outside of the corridor. They will be they will be checked based upon the risk assessment of their health and the usual health and risk-based assessment that we use for everyone. And they will be required to make an appointment at one of our testing locations to do a PCR test. Let me explain that a little bit. So non-Jamaicans and Jamaicans who are coming home, they are not going to resorts, they're coming to be amongst the general population. At the airport, they will be screened. Now clearly, if we screen them and they are showing symptoms, they would have to be isolated. So they would then come under the protocols of the Ministry of Health. And that would include testing as well. If the physical observation does not reveal anything, but the assessment of where they're coming from, the group to which they are a member, reveals that they are high risk, then they will be required to register, make an appointment for their PCR test. They will go home, but they are under quarantine orders. So the arrangement is, we send you home, and you're under quarantine orders. You then do your test. That is, you go to your nearest health facility. You go back home under quarantine orders. You await your test results. And depending on your assessment, if your result is negative, again, it's still an assessment, you could be under quarantine or you could be under stay at home. If your result is positive, then you could be asked to isolate at home, or you may be taken into a state facility because where your conditions at your home may not be suitable for isolation or quarantine. Now, it is important that Jamaicans understand that we are not abandoning testing. Testing will be done. But in order to ensure that we can test everyone coming in, this is the best way to facilitate the testing. We certainly just could not test 1,500 people coming in on a daily basis at the airport. That is not possible based upon the resources that we have. So it is best that they go home, quarantine, and then test. You know, if you just stop for a while and consider it, it's the same thing. We swab them at the airport, but they travel home and they await their test under quarantine. So in any event, the risk of sending them home without testing is not much greater than the risk of testing at the airport. But to further mitigate the risk, the redistribution of the resources from the airport back into the community, that's very important. When we move the people out of the community, we are not able to conduct the surveillance. So we have to bring back the professionals into the community, and they will be supported now by the 1,000 community health aides that Minister Tufton is now mobilizing. And they would definitely need to have the professionals alongside them to train them to do the community surveillance. So that is the public health advice, and that is what will prevail come the 1st of July. I think based upon the evidence we have of the risk, based upon very detailed examination of the options we have, based upon our budget and the resources that we have, based upon the risk of fatigue and breakdown of the Ministry of Health staff, which they have been pushing so hard during this pandemic, I believe that this is the best option. Of course, I am well aware that we will have many critics and many persons who will have other ideas. We are always willing to hear what else could work. We don't claim to have a patent on knowledge, so we always want to hear if there are other methods that can be used, but I wish to assure the nation that this is something that we deliberated on long and hard, even up to today, even up to the last 30 minutes. Minister Tufton and Minister Bartlett and Minister Mackenzie, the entire cabinet was deliberating on this matter. But I believe we have come to what is the best solution so far. Of course, tourists who are coming into the island, again, they have to be tested before they can come into the island. They will go through the screening. They will go to their resort or hotel or wherever they are staying within the COVID resilient corridor, because that is still operational. And of course, if during the screening they are showing symptoms, they will be isolated, they will be tested. The stay in zone orders for the COVID resilient area is a strict order which we intend to enforce, but so far we haven't seen any need for that because the level of compliance has been fairly high. The hotel operators understand that it is important to ensure that the visiting population is kept separate as much as possible from the on-island population. We will have to, of course, do much more surveillance and testing of the hotel workers to make sure, because they would be the conduit from hotels to communities. And the Ministry of Health has given me the assurance that that surveillance and testing will be ramped up in the days coming. So, ladies and gentlemen, I could, if there's no other matter, let me just check my notes here. Yes, I believe we have covered. Yes, we have covered everything except the business traveler. And the business traveler hotel or place where they will be staying, and upon the receipt of their result, if their result is negative, then they are allowed to conduct their business, and if their result is positive, then they fall under the standard health protocol of isolation and treatment. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, apologize for the late start, and thank you for listening and watching. May I invite Minister Mackenzie to, if you want to give any update on the beaches. and then I'll ask Minister Bartlett to just give a brief overview as to what has happened with tourism, and then the Minister of Health to give his update.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. Just to say, last week when I gave the update in Parliament on the performance of the beaches, over this weekend, Prime Minister and colleagues, we did another underground assessment, and we have found that there is about 91% non-compliance of all the protocols of the beaches that we surveyed over the weekend. As you mentioned, I'll be making a statement in Parliament on Wednesday. And in that statement to Parliament, I will be outlining certain steps that we are going to be putting in place to ensure that we get the kind of compliance that is required, among other things, in making announcements as it relates to other areas of responsibility. But I just want to make the point to the wider public and to emphasize the point earlier made by the Prime Minister, that there has to be a certain level of responsibility that is brought to the table by Jamaicans. We understand the importance of going to the beach and to the rivers and to exercise and to have some level of freedom. But we have to do this in a controlled fashion. And what we are seeing is a level of indiscipline that has creeped into the use of these facilities. And I want to commend those operators who have made the efforts to ensure that a lot of the protocols that have been outlined have been put in place. So again, I want to use tonight to make a final appeal so that on Wednesday, when I address the matter fulsome in the Parliament, I will be in a better mood, Prime Minister, to advise of the steps that will be taken.
Thank you, Prime Minister, colleagues, distinguished partners, media. The tourism partners all have, I think, responded well to the challenge of the phase opening. And I'm very pleased to advise that Jamaica's approach has been noticed by the world. And the comments that we've been getting from across the globe have been very flattering, and indeed it is indicating that when all our partners come together and when we are committed to a task and when we apply our collective will and our collective intelligence, we can make a difference. Are we perfect? No. Are there areas that we have to deal with? Yes. And these areas we are going to deal with, the team that we've established, Prime Minister, continues to work. Up to this morning, the COVID recovery team met, including the opposition spokesman on tourism, Dr. McNeil, who is a member of the team. And he's fully au fait with all that we have been doing and saying. And he makes his points, and we take them into account, and we deal with them, and we make sure that there is a general understanding as to the way forward in managing this phased opening of tourism. Prime Minister indicated just a little over 5,000 visitors and Jamaican nationals who are living overseas came to our shores during this first 2 weeks. We've brought back somewhere in the region of 15,000 workers, and we look forward to going to step 2, as indicated by the PM, and the JTB will be working with our partners so that they understand the way in which we are managing this whole process, and most important, the algorithms that are guiding the management that are clear and that people can follow and understand why we do what we do. So I want to say thanks again to Ministry of Health and the teams who have worked so hard with us. The protocols are being observed and we want to strengthen now. And just Prime Minister, I want to announce that we've today, this morning, put together a new COVID Resilience Corridor Management Team that will be led by John Biles and Andrew Spencer. And that team will be responsible for tightening up the arrangements within the corridor so that we could not only fulfill the obligations that our protocols are requiring, but also to ensure that the order that establishes the corridor can be understood by everybody and complied with by all. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Minister Tufton.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to just take the opportunity to thank the Honourable Prime Minister and the Cabinet for their leadership and support over these number of months as we have maneuvered, if you will, this COVID threat that has affected our country in a significant way. I want to also use the opportunity to just recognize and really commend the public health team, led of course by the Permanent Secretary and the Chief Medical Officer, but involving thousands of public health workers, over 17,000 in the public health system, and administrative staff, but in particular the frontline workers, the contact tracers, the public health nurse, inspectors, community health aides, all of whom have been directly involved in the front line and certainly have put their lives at risk for the benefit of the country and for the overall cause. I think we need to remind ourselves every day as to the efforts that they make, and so I want to reiterate that. But in particular today, I reiterate that because I think we're at a crossroads in terms of the phases of response to this COVID risk. And the Prime Minister articulated it well when he summarized the need for 100% testing over the past month, that's the month of June, and the data that was collected and the use of that data to assess the approach, to expand and to learn from the approach, to go through a learning curve so that we could make the necessary adjustment with management of that risk. Now, it's a risk that evolves, and so while certain variables may remain fairly constant, there are other variables that are changing, and some of those variables are not totally in our control. So even though we had a 0.7% positive rate for the numbers that came in, I think about 14,000 or so over that period, the truth is, when you look external to Jamaica, despite the efforts of our team members, the reality is that primary source markets, whether for residents or non-residents coming in, that risk profile is also changing. But it is changing in a way that requires us to assess that risk, not just as one destination, meaning North America, but looking at states within North America and applying a particular risk profile depending on the different states. And that's what we have done in assessing where that risk is greatest and why testing as part of the overall screening process may have to continue. And we juxtapose that against the capacity of the local team to continue in a sustainable way the type of 100% testing. I mean, everybody will be screened, and frankly speaking, we have always screened at our ports of entry. And I think Jamaicans need to recognize that. Sometimes you don't notice it, but temperature checks are done. The nurses are always there, and they will pull you from the line if they suspect, question you, and of course, subject you to further interrogation if necessary, depending on what they're looking for. So that will continue for everybody. But as it relates to testing, as the Prime Minister said earlier, we think that we're at a point, and given the capacities of our resources, the public health team and the infrastructure, where we can now distinguish the risk from one state to the next, and by extension, individuals depending on where they're coming from, and then apply an approach that may not always involve testing. So with the tourists or the non-residents, as the Prime Minister said, effectively the 10th, is it the 10th or the 7th? The 10th. Those persons who are going to be uploading information on the Jam COVID Visit Jamaica site would need to do a PCR test within a 7-day period of travel. And that for us represents one form of screening. And it's essentially doing what we would have done here with everybody in the month of June. And we believe that it's important to be done, at least for the time being. And what it does, it frees up some of the resources that we have here to do the type of community-based surveillance as we had to do over the past week in Norwood, St. James, or in West Kingston. It's the same persons who have to do some of that work. So for us, that's important. And at the same time, I want to just reiterate that not all non-residents will come from a country that is high risk. And the risk profile we use, the determination based on rates of infection, but also we're guided by the WHO, the World Health Organization, and PAHO to conclude on those countries that are high risk or states that are high risk. Where that risk is deemed not to be as great, then testing would not be necessary in those cases based on the designation of the risk. And the health authorities will make that determination. And I just want to say to those who may be concerned that we, in public health, as is the case with the government, will not take any decision that is going to jeopardize or unnecessarily put the country at risk. I think we have done well so far, and hopefully that credibility that we have is intact, and we will maintain and be as transparent as possible with that approach. Similarly with Jamaicans, it is about the high-risk groups. They will be sent home, having been screened initially, will be assigned to go and do their testing at a location that will be designated. But, as I understand it, based on the decision we have taken, the testing is a function of the risk, even though the 2-week period stay at home would be maintained. And what we would require of them, and I'm closing now, is that all Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans who come into the country, if they have symptoms, and this is very important because over the past week, we have had cases with persons with symptoms who have not reported those symptoms. It is absolutely necessary that if you have the sneezing, the cough, the cold, anything that is linked to COVID, and we have to see it as our duty to remind persons of those symptoms, you must check in with your 8881 Love number for guidance or with your health center and continue to protect yourself with the protocols that we have announced, the masks, the sanitizing, the quarantining, the social distancing or physical distancing. That is very, very, very important. I close, Prime Minister, with your permission by just giving an update on Norwood and West Kingston. So we did 2 days, Thursday and Friday, June 25th to 26th. In the case of West Kingston, we had a team of nearly 100 or so public health workers in that community, the particular community. We visited 264 homes. We interviewed 721 citizens, and we collected 137 samples. We had 4 positive cases in the first instance, and we discovered 1 additional positive case, and that represented for us a much better understanding of what is happening there, and we did not find a need for quarantining the community. And finally, in terms of Norwood, we did 2 days, that's Friday and Saturday, June 26 and 27. We had 40 staff members there. We did 63 home visits, interviewed 279 persons, collected 165 samples, and we, through the contact tracing, which is contacts of the original case, we discovered an additional 8 cases. At this point, we did not see the need for quarantining the community, but it just goes to show the effort that is required and why we need the resources in the communities where we believe the risk could be great if we allow a community spread to take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ministers, for your presentation. I believe we could take a few questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. Ahead of us starting this evening, we did have a test of all systems with members of the media, and we have outlined the ground rules concerning exactly what would happen this evening. And so, sir, there are 21 persons on our Zoom platform. And let me start off then with Ms. Dion Jackson Miller from Radio Jamaica. Mrs. Miller.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Appreciate it. Couple of questions. One, can I ask for clarification on the July 1, July 10 dates in relation to testing? Not quite clear what is happening on what dates, the requirement for the testing becomes effective. That's one. Two, given what we're seeing in the United States, and yes, some states are seeing worse surges than others, but why isn't there an across-the-board requirement for persons coming from the United States to be pre-tested? And final question in relation to what we're seeing coming out of reports about additional complications being suffered from persons who have supposedly recovered from COVID-19, that the virus is now being seen by researchers as perhaps attacking other systems such as the cardiovascular system, leading to stroke and heart attack in people who are thought to have recovered. Is the Ministry of Health following up on our patients who have recovered, since they and their families may not necessarily make the connection in terms of what we're seeing reported?
Thank you, Dion. Excellent questions. In terms of the dates, so the 1st of July would mark the beginning of the pre-testing requirement for those coming from or originating from areas which the Ministry of Health will define based upon our own surveillance and intelligence as high risk. I believe I named a few areas. It would be Florida, Texas, New York, and Arizona. Those are what we have declared so far. So those persons who are visiting Jamaica, so they are coming in for a short period of time and are likely to be going into hotels or other such places, they would be required to get a pre-test done in the area that they're coming from, a test done rather, before they come to Jamaica. They would be required to upload that test on the Visit Jamaica website, and the test should not be more than 7 days. 10th of July, we will start asking for the test. But remember now, they would start applying on the 1st and uploading from that period of time. And therefore, their approval coming into Jamaica through the Visit Jamaica website will be dependent on whether or not they have actually uploaded that pre-test. So between the 1st and the 10th, you could consider that to be a notice period. The other question, I think the CMO would be the best person. That's a clinical question.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your question. In terms of the cases that have been reported. We have noted over time that there have been case reports of persons that are developing disorders that are related to other systems outside of the respiratory